This is Bill Newman, WHMP.
Welcome to NPR, Northampton Poetry Radio, with erstwhile Poet Laureate Rich Michelson. Rich?
Well, I am absolutely thrilled tonight to have tonight.
Oh my goodness!
You're ahead of the man is always ahead of himself. He's so futuristic.
6 o'clock rebroadcast. We're happy to be here tonight.
Somebody, Bob Flaherty, just walked in and passed me a note and got this whole
That's what happens.
This whole thing
Messes
going
up your
off
groove.
kill. Okay, so tonight, Ravi Shankar is reading. My guest, the wonderful poet at Elms College. Write this down. Don't miss it. It's actually College of Our Lady of the Elms, I should say. 7:30, you'll be reading tonight, and a reception at 7 p.m. at the Blue House. That's 147 Grape Street. Again, College of Our Lady of the Elms. And it is an absolute pleasure to have you here, Ravi.
Thank you.
I am going to dispense with, because I want to make sure we get in some poems and get some talking, and dispense with all your honors. But some of the highlights, I know you edited Norton's Language for New Century, Contemporary Poets from Asia and Middle East and Beyond. This year you have 3 new books.
It's a bounty crop,
It's
very rare.
unbelievable.
Yeah.
Union, 50 years of writing from Singapore, 15 years of The Drunken Boat. I hope we have time to talk about The Drunken Boat, which you started, one of the first online poetry magazines. And also you have the Autobiography of a Goddess, translations of 9th century Tamil poet Andal,
Andal.
who is the only female Alvar Saint, and she composed all of her poems before she was 15. I'm just telling you this in the audience because we're not going to have a lot of time to talk about that. What I really want to talk about is your new book, What Else Could It Be? Ekphrastics and Collaborations. This is an amazing book, and I do love your work. There's a formality. There's almost a classicism to your work that is mixed with, totally the other side. It's like totally experimental as well. I don't know how you manage those two forms.
Well, I was supposed to be a mathematician or a scientist, and much to the chagrin of my parents, I became a poet. So I have to mix that in some way.
Well, what's about this book? You have a poem called Algorithm, Will You Dance? Where you wrote a poem and then you put it in Google Translate, translating into Arabic, and then back into English, and then translated again into Hungarian. It's almost like the game Telephone.
That's right.
How did this come to you?
Well, this book is all in collaboration. So I'm collaborating with living writers and artists, and I came up with these lines that I sent to various poets, and I said, please build on it, send it back to me, and we'll see where it goes. And so I took those same lines, and I thought, why don't I collaborate with a machine and see what happens? And interestingly, new vistas of language opened up. It's pretty fascinating.
Wow. So you collaborated with Google. You collaborated with living poets.
I was so happy you just didn't say, and I also collaborated with dead poets, because that would have been really interesting.
Yeah.
Well, some of these poems are based on works by dead poets, dead artists, living artists. It's really, what I love about this is it's a collaboration of all the arts, dance, music, poetry, and you're bringing everything into this. In a way that I've not seen done before. So I'd like to start out with a poem. If you could give us with your collaboration with John Cage. Again, you're listening to NPR, Northampton Poetry Radio. My guest is Ravi Shankar. He's reading tonight at Elms College. And
not the Ravi Shankar you might have thought would have collaborated with John Cage. That's what's interesting about it.
But this is give us a sense of what we can look forward to tonight at your reading.
Well, I'll definitely read some of these new poems. I'll also read some of the translations. But what's fascinating about these collaborations is that sometimes when I read these, I can't tell what I wrote and what the other poet wrote. I mean, this third voice emerges, and we all have our the kinds of syntax that we like to use, and working with someone else, it's as closest to a jazz musician as I'll ever be, probably, for someone who's tone deaf like me. It's pretty good. So this Cage piece, I actually got to meet Merce Cunningham years ago, and he talked about
the dancer and choreographer.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, at the McDowell Colony, and he talked about putting on these performances with Robert Rauschenberg and John Cage, and told these great stories. And so Cage was always someone who I found very fascinating. He found music anywhere in the silence. And so this poem, and I can read it for you.
Sure, please.
As Slow as Possible is about, it's apparently the longest orchestral piece imagined, and the poem kind of describes it, but we won't listen to the end of it in our lifetime, and our children won't either. It's called As Slow as Possible. And there's a little, I start all of these collaborations and with artists with a little epigraph from them, and in this case from Cage, it's, if something is boring after 2 minutes, try it for 4. If still boring, then 8. Then 32. Eventually one discovers it is not boring at all. As Slow as Possible. Heard from a painter how the piece being performed in a small church in Germany articulates to the history of the organ, 639 years old in 2001 when the concert began and scheduled to end in 2640, one note in years. We were talking about duration in art, how we stop on a word in a poem or stand in front of a painting for 30 seconds that could easily be 30 minutes or 30 years, but how music transpires in time in a categorically different way, the sound departing even as it arrives in our ear and nervous system. This Cage piece is as close as someone could come to freeing music from temporality, and it commenced in St. Bacardi Church in Halberstadt on what would have been Cage's 89th birthday, and because the score begins on a rest, it started with a 17-month silence, save for the sound of the bellows of the instrument encased in acrylic glass being inflated. Every time a note changes, there's a party, and at the last chord shift, which will last for 7 years, there were thousands of visitors, international correspondents, and camera crews, an event broadcast worldwide on a website. Hyper-durational, said the painter, only in Germany.
So John Cage, of course, is a musician who welcomed randomness into his work, much as you're doing here when you're working with other poets. There's a quality of not knowing what's coming at you. So how did those collaborations work?
Well, I just came up with a dozen potential starting lines. And years ago, there's a poet, a DC poet, Reb Livingston. We started writing postcards to each other. And as we were corresponding, I felt like this was kind of a collaborative piece of art that we were making. And so we published a little chapbook called Wanton Textiles years ago. And it was so fun that I thought, maybe I'll try this with other people. And so I have the same exact lines, and I sent them to various poets. And I said, if any of these speak to you, use it as your starting point, build on it, send it back to me. And we'll kind of go back and forth and discover where we're going by going. And in each case, the process was very different. There were a couple of one poet who I had to kind of break up with, who wouldn't stop collaborating with me. But you know,
boy, that was an artistic way to phrase that.
Roses are red, violets are blue. They're like, no, take it, stop.
This relationship is over, and how are you?
But you know, it was a lot of fun. I collaborated with poets as diverse as Eileen Miles, Brian Turner, who I have to say I'm thinking about today. His wife, Elise, just passed away with brain cancer, and so it's heavy on my heart. And also, I should also take this moment to give a shout-out to my daughter, Samara, who's 11 today.
Hey,
happy birthday,
today.
Samara. Yeah.
Yes.
So,
happy birthday to you.
But I can read you a small poem that another collaboration, if you like.
Let's do that. And because that's interesting, that starts with one of those first lines you passed that with a beautiful line. So let's... so
this is called Last Turn on the Left, and it's a poem I'm thinking about because I collaborated with Connecticut poet Claire Rossini, who teaches at Trinity College, at a time when her own father was very ill, and so I'm kind of thinking about that a little bit. So this is called Last Turn on the Left. It's a collaboration with Claire Rossini. Yes, Lycra can improve your performance, but that little red sports car, only its music could tell you where it's off to. A vineyard in the foothills, a Rosh Hashanah Seder, or a cliff's edge, its mids and woofers growling with guitar or languid with opera. And when you get to where you thought your thought was leading you, that note-spear testament nobody can pin to a latitude, you'll find the excrement of grief, its uncontrolled movement of leave-taking, every arrival laden with its own departure, like the Buddhist sutra on the mindfulness of the body in decay, sung by ancient Indian pilgrims in the charnel grounds, where a corpse, still green, still held together by sinew, becomes the bespattered subject of contemplation. Where does an hour go? Same place as life. I thought I was following this wending road towards the sea's terminal blues. Thought the heart was leading me there by its weight and chill. I thought I was being led.
That's beautiful. That's Ravi Shankar, who is reading tonight at 7:30, Elms College. Where is Elms College? Chicopee? Chicopee, yes. And so you came up with this line, and I just love this. Yes, Lycra can improve your performance. And I'm just looking down here at the various Google translations. That it became after Hungarian for elastic, stretchable performance. Then it was translated into Haitian. Yes, Lycra pants can improve performance. It's fascinating the way that just keeps going on and on and on in many different ways. So we're catching you before you are heading for a long trip. You're on your way to China. Tell us a little bit about what's coming up.
Yes, well, I'm doing a few things. So I'm leaving at the end of this month, and I'm heading to Asia. I'll be in Vietnam, where I'm part of this PhD program through Royal Melbourne Institute of Technology. Then I'm going to be in Thailand and Australia, reading from these new books. And then the longer part of my stay will be in Guangzhou, which is kind of close to Hong Kong in China, but a very beautiful temperate region where I have a residency with Sun Yat-sen University for a month. And I'm going to hopefully I'm working on a memoir now. So I'll be working on that, and then I finish off the stay at NYU Shanghai, and we'll be gone for almost 2 months. So it'll be fascinating.
All us people with boring lives here. But it sounds absolutely great. I do want to make sure we get in just a moment. You started this journal, Drunken Boat, back when putting poetry on the web wasn't done. And you've just celebrated 15 years. You have a new book here called 50 Years of Writing from Singapore, Union. And it's also connected with 15 years of Drunken Boat poetry. Bringing together two totally different ideas into one book.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Drunken Boat, started in 1999, and we published not just traditional forms of representation like poetry and prose, but a lot of works of art that could only appear online. So video, sound art, web art, hypertext, digital animation, all kinds of collaborative stuff. And so you can check us out online, drunkenboat.com. Yes, we are one of the oldest, and I guess now publishing online is legitimate. When we started, it really was not.
For those of our listeners who are saying Drunken Boat poetry, something I might want to participate in, what does that mean, Drunken Boat?
Well, it actually comes from, there's this French symbolist poet called Arthur Rimbaud. He had this famous poem called Le Bateau Ivre, Drunken Boat. And so I back in 99, I really liked these visionary poets, and so that's the name of the journal. That's where it comes from.
I love all these collaborations. It's so pleased to have you here with us this morning. We first met, watch this for me moving from one subject to another. We first met, I think, last year at the Amherst Poetry Festival.
Emily Dickinson's house.
And Emily Dickinson's house. And that is a quick segue for me to end up. I need to let everybody know that today, tomorrow, this weekend is the Amherst Poetry Festival. Please go on to the Emily Dickinson site, home site. You'll see many happenings. There's a full reading, 14 hours on this Saturday of Emily Dickinson's 1,789 poems. Every one will be read. Go to the house. You can listen in. You can read if you sign up. It's a wonderful day of poetry. There's a lot of local poets and national poets are coming to read. Our own Leslie Newman, Sally Bellerose, Ellen LaFlèche, Gail Thomas are reading. Many other people as well. Tonight, Donuts and Death. You can go to Emily Dickinson's grave and read her most depressing poems.
Does donuts lead to death?
But and also Pokemon Go. So everybody, check out this weekend Amherst Poetry Festival. Ravi Shankar, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Rich.
This is Rich
Pleasure.
Michelson on NPR Northampton Poetry Radio.
And Katy Perry's birthday for tomorrow, who turned 11 today.
This is Bill Newman, WHMP.